Here, back with a new video. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at the top 10 budget decks right now, which have been massively updated with Lost Origin. So just getting into it, at number 10 we have Spiritomb with Cinccino and Ditto. So Spiritomb is the one that I've had my eye on for a little while now with Lost Origin. It's a very strong card that allows you to do 10 damage and then 60 more for each Spiritomb in your discard pile, and it has the amazing ability Curse Message that says when Spiritomb is knocked out, you can search your deck for any card that you like, which is obviously a very strong ability in a deck like this because we need to find multiple Spiritombs, get them into discard pile, then try and use right hand most turns to accelerate more energy. It's a very strong deck, and I'm not sure how it will fare moving forward into the format, so that's why it's number 10 on this list. I do think it's worth taking a look at, and it's worth bearing in mind for the future. My main concerns with this deck being that Mew is like a bit of a problem, despite hitting weakness on Mew. So Mew is a bit of a problem because of like Lost City, and decks that play Lost City in general can obviously send a Spiritomb into the Lost Zone as a stadium card. So in case you didn't know what that is, that's just like whenever they knock out a Pokemon, then they can, if they have Lost City in play, they can just send your attacker into the Lost Zone. Very problematic and could be a major problem for a deck like Spiritomb and an upcoming Ditto-like deck that we'll talk about in a second. So definitely a bit of a problem for Spiritomb, and it's one I'm concerned about. However, this list is super unique. This was won by LDF, and I think he got it from someone else as well. So it's doing the rounds a bit. I do want to try this out myself. I do think it's really cool, and hopefully Spiritomb can end up being a really good one-prize deck. So moving in at number 9, we have the Borro Gyarados. So the main attacker in this deck is, of course, Magikarp and Ditto again. Ditto allows you to copy Magikarp's Raging Fin that does 10 damage, and then 30 more for each Magikarp and Gyarados in your discard pile. So naturally, you do less damage in Spiritomb, but it is a little bit more forgiving in that if your opponent like lost cities away a Ditto or a Carp, it's not like the end of the world. You can still reach 2 KO potential pretty easily, which is why I don't think it's worth just writing this deck off completely. However, this deck more or less features the same kind of draw engine, the same kind of Pokestop, kind of heavy Ultra Ball kind of package, I guess you could say. And with the Glare and Meowth allowing you to discard 2 cards from your hand, so you can discard excess Magikarp and Gyarados. So I do believe this deck has, it's not like got decent potential in standard, but it's certainly a cheap one that you can pick up, and it's definitely not like the worst deck to, to take to a locals or something. It could end up being that Spiritomb is just the better deck overall in the long run, but this deck is certainly like not terrible either, and it's definitely something that's worth keeping an eye on. The number 8 spot, we have Solarrock Lunatone, or Solarrock for short, a deck that came out in Pokemon Go set. If you're playing online at any point during when that set dropped, then you'll be very familiar with this deck because it just saw a ton of play on the ladder. And rightfully so, it's a very easy to play, very consistent one-prize deck. However, the main issue with Lunarrock or the Solarrock deck is that it does run into a couple of consistency issues if you don't get all the guys down in the early turns. So it does kind of rely on you getting a wee bit lucky with finding quick balls, trekking shoes, battle VIP bass, and getting lucky off Pokestop and whatnot. However, all that aside, this is a fantastic deck. Just in case you're not familiar with these guys, Lunatone does 30 damage and then 30 more for each psychic energy attached to this Pokemon. And then Solarrock allows you to once in your turn attach a psychic energy from your discard pile to one of your Lunatones. And why this is very broken is Scoop Up Net can actually pick up your Solarrocks, and you can essentially use one Solarrock Sun Energy ability twice in your turn, effectively, if you're willing to use a Scoop Up Net. So, very powerful, can quite easily just pressure a lot of tempo in the early turns. If you're going second, you can very easily hit 120 or even 150 sometimes. And of course, with a Choice Belt, you can get much higher. And you only need to be doing like roughly 150, 180 with a Choice Belt anyway, just to 2 KO everything consistently. So, very strong deck in that regard, and a great beginner deck. So moving on a wee bit, we have kind of like one of the first Lost Origin decks we're looking at, apart from Spiritomb, and that is actually going to be the Durant Chandelure deck. So Durant has the Attack of Devour that allows you to discard the top card of your opponent's deck for each Durant in play. Shock horror, this is a mill deck. But the Chandelure is a really interesting inclusion from Lost Origin that says when you evolve this Pokemon from Lampent, you get to discard the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck. And this person has obviously seen this card and thought, well, there's actually some synergy here. Yeah, it's a stage 2, but it's not like the main attack or anything, and we can just set it up on the sideboard. And because we're such a low maintenance deck anyway, it's kind of easy to get going. This deck actually had a pretty decent placement at a recent Lost Origin event. I think it was in top 16. So it's definitely not terrible or anything. It's just, I think Durant's a wee bit hard to play as a beginner player. But if you're very committed and you want to learn how to play a mill deck, then this would be a great place to start for you. And it's definitely a one that I'll be looking into in the future, just because Chandelure and Durant are really cool Pokemon anyway. And this deck obviously has a lot of new tricks to work with in the Lost Origin format. For example, Misfortune Sisters, sorry. The card in the top row allows you to look at the top 5 cards of your deck and then discard, I think it's up to 3 items or any amount of items you find there. So very strong supporter against a lot of these other turbo decks that are running like High Council Switch and Escape Rope. So you can strand a Comfrey or something in the active, then that could be pretty devastating. But just moving on, we have a Clefairy Basque Legion deck that I recently featured a very similar list to this on my channel. This list has been this very Hisuian Basculin list has actually been performing pretty well, better than the wider ones, funnily enough, than on some of the online limitless events. I do think this is a pretty cool list. It's got like a couple of cards that I would say, I'm not so sure about. Like the Gyarados Kuno is fair enough. It allows you to accelerate 2 Psychic Energy to it, but I would say that if you're unable to trade for one of these, it's not like the end of the world if you don't include it. But essentially, Clefairy has the amazing ability Moonwatching Party, if you haven't seen it before, allows you to attach a Psychic Energy from your deck to each of your other bench Clefairies. So as soon as we get 4 Clefairy out in play, which is pretty easy to do thanks to Fog Crystal and Level Ball existing, we can very easily just flood the board with loads of energies, and that's why we play a high count of energy, 17 energy. And then why this deck is like pretty good and why it has a really nice late game is because of Hisuian Basque Legion. With the attack upstream spirits, it doesn't require any energy, allows you to shuffle in all the energy from your discard pile back into your deck, and deals 20 damage for each one. And then Clefairy does 20 damage for each energy attached to all your Pokemon, so obviously great synergy. And Hisuian Basque Legion just doing like 200, 220 flat sometimes just allows you to, of course, reset all your Clefairies, and also allow you to conserve some switches for a late game. So very strong deck, pretty cool, pretty cheap as well actually, one of the cheapest decks on this list. And yeah, that's why I have it ranked on here. So another one is going to be Malamar. Malamar's had a bit of a rough run in the TCG, sadly. It's kind of been a bit of a hit and miss deck. It has seen a little bit of resurgence recently. Finished, I think it was 14th out of a 200-player event, so pretty good. However, Malamar is kind of regarded as one of the harder budget decks to play. And just like looking at this list, you kind of see why. You have to manage your resources correctly. However, stuff like Rapid Strike Tentacles is a very powerful attack, allowing you to deal 40 damage for each Rapid Strike Pokemon or Trainer card or energy that you reveal from your hand and shuffle back into your deck. So that's why we need to run high counts of Karina's Focus and Brawly and stuff like Towers of Water, Spiral Energy, and Octillery. However, a big issue with this deck is that it tends to run some problems because obviously you're trying to get these big 2-hit KOs or even 1-hit KO knockouts, but you also need to prepare for another Malamar on your next turn. You also need to not play through all your Karina's Focus most of the time. You need to save a few back. There's also Brawly you have to manage, Drizzle you have to manage, Octillery needs to, be there to find your Spiral Energy every turn probably, so the deck has a couple of issues. It is a bit flippant, and against some of the other one prizers that are on this list, I do think Malamar does struggle a bit. However, it has been seeing a bit of a resurgence, so moving into a heavy V-Star or even potentially an EX meta in the next set, Scarlet and Violet in Gen 9, this can end up being a very strong attacker and something to keep in mind. So moving into number 4th, I believe, this is Dewgong Bibaro. This is just Azul GG's list that he was working on. I personally don't agree with the 4/4 Bidoof Bibaro, but until I've tested the deck myself, I won't know if that's actually the correct way to play it or not. What really stops this from being like a super cheap budget deck is the 4 Arita. I don't think you need to play 4 Arita. You can get away with just 1 or 2. But Arita is several packs each, so if you're looking for a replacement for Arita, I would just play something like 4 Research or 4 Bruno potentially, and then just like call it a day, because I don't think you need Arita necessarily. It's just a nice inclusion to have. But either way, Dewgong allows you to do 40 damage for each water energy that you shuffle into your deck attached to all your Pokemon. And then Finian just allows you to accelerate any amount of energy from your hand to your Pokemon with Swim Freely. And the only Pokemon we have with Swim Freely in this deck is Dugong. However, how this ends up being even better than Malamar is that obviously you're not trying to conserve resources in your hand. Malamar was very limited in the fact that you couldn't really dig too far into your deck. Like you couldn't play any shuffle draw stuff because you had to conserve a large hand to make and then just dump it all at the end of a turn. But Dugong just allows you to, use Barrel, draw a bunch of cards, attach a bunch of energy, and then like Lady for 4 more energy, attach all them. So yeah, very strong card. Could be pretty good moving forward. I'm not seeing this deck have too much representation in online events, which is pretty interesting, but I'd give it a wee bit more time, and this could end up being a good deck. All the more reason to pick it up, though, because it is still a really cheap deck, and it could end up being really good further down the line. So moving on to third place, we have Zoroark Arcanine. Arcanine has the amazing attack of Very Vulnerable, weirdly named, but deals 10 damage, and if you have no cards in your hand, deals 150 more. Big fan of this card because it naturally kills an Arceus, and it requires 0 energy. So not only can we play a low count of energy, but because it's stage 1, we can also make use of Zoroark. Zoroark, if you're not familiar with this card, allows you to discard it and all cards attached to it, and then replace it with a stage 1 from your discard pile, which obviously allows us to play a crap ton of like single prize stage 1 Pokemon that are really cool. So we have Arcanine, we have Barrel, we have the Mightyena that can actually want to kill Mew VMAX, which is really cool. We also play an Appleton in here that allows you to flip a coin if heads, pull a basic Pokemon up from the opponent's bench. We also play a Wormadam, so this person is essentially respecting the Kyurem matchup and saying, well, Arcanine, even with the choice belts and grants in the deck, can actually struggle to KO Kyurem, who has like 330 hit points, because we only do 160 doubled is 320, so pretty difficult to reach those high numbers. But Wormadam with Matron's Anger can actually get a 1 KO on Kyurem, funnily enough, if you have enough Pokemon in the discard pile, so very strong in that regard. The Twin Energy is also in here just so we can attack with Slowbro, which has the amazing attack Twilight Inspiration that says if your opponent has 1 prize card remaining, you take 2 prize cards. So that's kind of like why this deck has a really positive matchup against a lot of other 1-prizers. Yeah, you have to keep up and you have to keep being consistent, taking all these knockouts. But even if your opponent's playing a 1-prize deck and they take the first KO, as long as you can get Slowbro in those last few turns with a Twin Energy, you've basically just guaranteed game because it will just allow you to effectively win the prize race. So very powerful card and one that I would expect to see more of in the future. This list is also super interesting in the fact that it plays 2 copies of Judge. We don't usually see Judge. It also plays a new Hisuian Zoroark that says for 0 energy, at the end of your opponent's next turn, the defending Pokemon is knocked out, which is super interesting. It's also playing the new Banette that can send itself into the Lost Zone, just so you can pick up a supporter. So essentially it gives you access to another Peony in the boss's order, another Judge, another Grant if you need it, so that is cool. Also, didn't mention earlier, but there is a Radiant Venusaur in here. Radiant Venusaur allows you to drop to 4 at the end of your turn after you've attacked. So even if you dump your entire hand to use Arcanines, you can actually still drop to 4 at the end of your turn. So very powerful. Moving in at second place, we have a recent, very well placed actually, Regigigas list in an event. This one making use of the new Thornton combo. Thornton allows you to switch a basic Pokemon in play with one of your basic Pokemon in your discard pile. So for example, this deck is now playing the Radiant Charizard, which is super cool. However, I'm personally not a big fan of this combo just because you need Thornton in the right turns to use it. And if you have to discard it early on, then Radiant Charizard could end up being a bit of a liability, unless you're able to switch into it at the last minute and just attach a Fire Energy and win the game or something. But yeah, bit of a liability. But Thornton being able to make use of Radiant Charizard is still pretty cool. Also, you're not playing any Raihan or anything like that, so Charizard will only activate when your opponent is down to 1 prize card, which is... yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about that, but... oh wait, no, opponent has to be on 2 prize cards remaining. Sorry. Is that correct? 5 energy, 5 prize cards? Yeah, 2 energy, 2 prize cards, sorry. But either way, super cool list. One thing I will say, or one thing I will recommend, sorry, is the Regieleki split, playing the Astral Radiance Regieleki and then the Vivid Voltage Regieleki. I would say always play the Terra Spark one from Vivid Voltage because it's just so much better in the Palkia matchup and will allow you to want to kill Palkia with a belt. But either way, super cool list, and I expect to see Reggie's performing well. The number one spot shouldn't really be no surprise. It's the Comfrey Cramorant deck. The only reason this deck isn't like, I guess, the top of my radar personally is because of just like how expensive this would be for, I think, a new player to pick up if they didn't want to invest loads of packs into the game. I mean, IRL is probably a wee bit easier, but online you have to spend like one, maybe even two Lost Origin per Comfrey. Cramorant is one Lost Origin. There will always be scammers who say, no, it's for two Lost Origin. Sableye, oh, they'll say it's for two Lost Origin. Spoiler, it's for one Lost Origin. And then there's Aaron Guru, and then I think Radiant Charizard's a couple of packs. But other than that, it's just like a more of a deck that you can build if you open enough Lost Origin effectively. But you don't need like a bunch of other trainers. What is nice about this deck, though, is that not only do you play trainers like Trekking Shoes and Switching Cart that are featured in so many other decks that we've seen, so effectively you could build up to this deck if you've been playing any of the other budget decks featured here, but this deck can also lead into Giratina and such, or Gudra, or like maybe even another Lost Origin deck with the Lost Zone engine further down the line. So I do think it's worth mentioning that even if you aren't like a massive fan of the one price variant, but you still love the Lost Zone mechanic, you could essentially upgrade this deck and build something that's more expensive, such as Giratina. So that will do it for the top 10 budget deck lists. Let me know if I've missed anything, but I think that's all of them. Being a bit of a quick one, don't want to focus on more of a dissection of each deck list and rather just an overall list of what's the cheapest decks that are the best. So yeah, let me know what you think down below, and I'll hope you'll see you next time. Thank you for watching.